Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. We're going to wrap up today with a special selection, which is where one of you tell me exactly what it is I need to check out. Today's special selection comes at us from Anders. I'd like to request a reaction for the song Holy Holy, a new single from Geordie Greep, former frontman of Black Midi. I think it would be interesting to get your thoughts on this both musically and lyrically. Now, interestingly, we have checked out this song recently, about 2 or 3 weeks ago on live stream, but I think this will be pretty cool. Primarily because it sort of overwhelmed me during that live stream, and secondly because live streams I tend to listen a bit more casually. I still have some things to say about the songs, but I'm not trying to form 20 to 30 minutes worth of analysis about what the song is doing right, or wrong in some cases. And so I'm actually going to give it this critical listen here. Plus we'll have the music video up in the corner, which I heard was pretty interesting, but the person who requested the live stream pick didn't want it to distract me. So now I'm kind of intrigued by all of this. Let's dive in, see what Geordie Greep is bringing to the table with Holy Holy. So we got those those groups of three. Very bluesy wailing guitar.
I could tell you were lonely from the moment you walked in. From the way you had your makeup on, from the way you've done
lots of fun rhythms against this 4/4 backbone.
You sat down next to me, from the way you ordered your drink.
I think the first two bars were like a 7/8 to a 9/8.
I knew I'd have you with ease.
Oh, that fun little piano uplift.
Do you know how this thing works? Do you go to bed with a different man every night? Don't tell me I'm the first. You must have heard about
some fun trumpet stuff over on the other side.
Everyone knows my name. Everyone knows I'm holy.
The sax in the place of
All the revolutionaries, all the jihadis too. Round the world I'm holy. Holy, holy, holy,
yeah.
You know my name.
So the
Of course
whole
you know
comes
my
in
name.
on
Everyone
the
does,
and
it's
then the lead comes in on the downbeat. Really interesting.
It's true that I'm known around here. The barmaids know
A little
my
synth
name.
over here.
I've had them
A
all
little moving
before.
idea.
You are
Nice walking bass line piano chords. It's very jazzy on the foundation, but I wouldn't call it a jazz song.
shores of Havana to Moscow and Tokyo, in French Guyanese, in Cantonese, everyone knows my name. All the revolutionaries, all the jihadis too. Everyone knows I'm holy. How about we
That bluesy guitar over there again.
I'll spin you round and round on the dance
The
floor.
triplet hits from the beginning.
How about we take this further? I'll meet you in the bathroom. I bet your pussy is holy too.
Little Latin vibes here. Bringing that triplet hit. I don't know if it's triplet, it's just 3/16 notes, isn't it? 2/16 and an eighth. That's what it is.
I'll arrive at around 7 p.m. I want you to get there no later than 10. I want you to be dressed like a sophisticated guitar.
What's the piano doing back there?
Makeup on, will that be alright? And I want you to sit down next to me as if by chance. I want it to seem like
dreamlike, dreamy, maybe.
I want you to look unsure of yourself. And I want you to look at me as if I'm attractive. I want your eyes to say, take me. And I want your lips to be unimpressed. And I want you to ask the
fun rhythmic stuff over here. Oh, it's the three hits again. Very circular. You have a chord progression that has a bit of finality at the end, but the vocal melody goes in loops. A lot of that's just because the vocals stick with one note. Just keeps rising in pitch and intensity. I think there's a general loop on the bottom, but what's on top feels like it just keeps getting higher and louder. The layers becoming denser. Do I understand this any better on a second listen? A little bit. But I don't know that I have that much stronger of a grasp after a second listen. I did hear a lot more details this time around, that's for sure. But do I get it? I don't know. Maybe this is something where knowing the lyrics unlocks a bit. I know the person who requested it on a live stream posted a one sentence synopsis of what the lyrics were about. And that kind of helps a little bit, but I wonder if like really getting into each line is going to unlock this song. Because, here's the deal. This is kind of a single section song. There's nuance, there's variation to this A section. It's not just one idea for 6 minutes long. But there's also not a lot of movement to the track overall. It kind of feels like a fever dream musically. It all retains this core foundation at the bottom, and the details kind of shift and merge into each other on top. It creates something that feels linear but constantly folding back in upon itself. Even what I would consider the B section in the video, after we've gone through when the camera moves down the bowling lane, and then we have all those weird psychedelic colors, and this was the section where we had the rising, escalating tension. What was on the bottom of this, the foundation, when we listened to the bass and the chord progression and the drums and the piano, it's nothing new. We just took what we were already doing and made a slight change to it. Structurally, it was a little different here, but yeah, I mean that's what the song feels like to me. It's static yet undefining. It refuses to stick with any idea long enough for me to say, okay, this is what the song is, but it also does one thing for the entirety of its runtime. And that makes it sort of amorphous, difficult to pin down. I think that's what makes it uh, most difficult to figure out what's happening here, is because it's an anomaly. So let me get into some details here, kind of explain what I mean by this. Um, on the part that doesn't change, I mentioned the drums, I mentioned the chords, I mentioned the bass. Those don't really change much throughout. There are some sections where they will create some variation on what they're doing. The bass might move from a walking bass line into something a little bit more linear or melodic for a moment before returning back to that bass line. The drummer has a very consistent, sort of loungy drum style throughout here, usually enough energy in order to keep the song moving, but never really stealing the spotlight from anything else. The drums are primarily there to keep the song progressing, to keep that time and tempo cemented down for everything else to be playful with. And there's a lot of layers. So, having instruments, especially in our rhythm section, kind of take, fade into the background a little bit is exactly what you want to do with something like this. I would have liked for the drums to have had a moment to poke through and showcase something, but I kind of get the gist that that wasn't the purpose of this song. In fact, nothing really is put into the spotlight here other than the vocals, which to me puts a lot of import on the lyrics. Um, but then we also have the chords. These don't really change much either. There are a couple of moments, such as when we got to that Latin America vibe, right before what might be considered the B section. Again, this is where we moved from just having the camera in the bowling alley to having the psychedelic colors and then moving into the bar. The section just prior to that, we had an interesting harmonic shift, but I'd wager that the core chords, core chords, were the same, just with some change to it, right? So, we can have an A chord, but you can have minor modularity to that. A major, A minor, A major, A dominant, A Phrygian. There's a lot of different modes where we might start on the A notes, and we might have a majority of the same notes going up to the A octave above, but some of them are going to be slightly different. And I think that's what happens here, where we move from whatever modes we were in to whatever modes give us this new vibe, but that the progression of chords, the root name of the chord, doesn't change at all. And I would wager that most of the notes don't change either. It's just enough to give it this new flavor, this new spice, without removing that core movement in the harmonic foundation. And of course, we don't stick with this too long, because just as quickly as we move into this idea, we move back out of it to bring that original chordal movement underneath for this B section, the rising intensity moment of the song. So, like I said, small variations, right? Always returning back to that core sound. And the three of these, the bass movement, the drums, and the chord progression, hold the song down. They are consistent throughout. Again, small deviations here and there, but always returning back to this core form that we hear towards the beginning of the track. Now, I've mentioned chords a couple of times, but I haven't mentioned an instrument. Bass, drums, chords. It's not an instrument. The chords kind of get passed around between a few different instruments here. They do show up on a piano or possibly a piano-styled synthesizer multiple times. But we also hear them in a plethora of other instruments, sometimes having to be layered if it's a monophonic instrument, and that is that the instrument only plays one note at a time. Or chord shaping, which we hear in a few places which is basically instead of playing all the notes at one time to create your chord stack, you'll play the notes separately, individually, usually in a rising and falling pattern. That is the most traditional way of shaping out a chord, so that the listener can still feel the chord, but they get some movement to it and they get some melodic component to it rather than just playing the chord outright. And I thought this was really interesting because it allows this feeling of harmony, this home component of the song, to sort of shift around the track. And it allows that, like I said from the beginning, sort of the piano instrument to be freed up to do other things. We do hear some melodies coming out of the piano at times. Sometimes it is chord shaping, sometimes it's linear piano work. But it allows the piano to get outside of that role for a moment and explore something else, which is what the song does quite a bit. Not just with the piano, but with a lot of instruments. From the very beginning, we have those 2/16 notes plus an eighth note, da-da-da, 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 that rhythm showing up all over the place at the beginning of the song and throughout too. But it isn't always the same instrument playing it. It isn't always the same part of the song, part of the production, any of that. What felt like such a core component of that first verse, if we can call it that, ends up becoming this motif throughout the song. I don't remember what was it, the brass that kicks it off with that at the beginning. But we also hear the drums pick it up. We heard the bass play it. We hear violins doing it towards the end of the song. There's a moment in the middle of the song where a piano or a synthesizer is performing that rhythm. And of course, at the beginning of the song, there's a bit more movement. No, sorry, it's a bit more static. It's usually just one note, and that note might change with the chords. You might get da 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 da, that kind of idea. I don't know if that's probably not the exact notes, but the concept of staying on a single note inside that rhythm. However, in the very last section, I'd say the last 45 seconds of the song, give or take, we have moving pitches. I think every group of three is still its own note. I don't think we have pitch movement within groups of three, but it doesn't just stay on a single note with the chord progression. It moves. Almost every group of three is its own pitch. And I found this to be interesting because we took something that was purely textural, really creating this rhythmic feeling, this pulse within the song, and creating something melodious out of it. Again, taking something we had, minor variation on it. We pass it around between all these instruments, we get different timbres playing it, and then by the end of the song, it turns into something melodic. It's a shifting idea. There was actually a while in the song after that first verse where the rhythm didn't pick up for a while. It just kind of left it off to the side. I think that made it more affecting when that rhythm came back, because I don't think I remember the moment when it happened. It was more of a realization that, oh wait, that rhythm's back. When did that happen? It sort of sneaks into the song. Part of that is simply because there's so many freaking layers on this track. It's difficult to keep up with everything, especially with the way the song is produced, with the vocals being such in the spotlight, and at least for me, very intriguing. The vocals are clearly heard, and part of me wants to listen to that story. I also think that I don't think there's a chorus in here, is there? I kind of thought that the low chanting of the choir with the holy, I thought that was going to become the chorus, and then it never came back. It had chorus written all over it, we just never revisited it. So the linear style of the vocals also make me, intrigued. Hey, this is a story. This isn't just a song. This isn't just, some catchy lines that kind of feed into a feeling or an idea. I'm being told a story. What's going on here? And so it's very easy for my attention to get pulled away from the music because there is all of this complexity in there. And the vocals, they're like, hey, I'm just a simple melody and a story. You could listen to me. You don't even really have to think about it too much. But the rest of the music is like, hey, we've got like 25 layers, it's like 8 instruments in here. Ideas are bouncing all over the place. We're passing concepts around. There's just a lot of depth. If you want to listen to what's going on here, you're really going to have to think about it. And, that easily pushes a listener off to the vocals. But what I find quite intriguing about it isn't just the level of layers, which of course towards the end of the song, we'll get there in a second, but I mean, there's even more at the end. But there's this whole thing about movement. And I've said this many times, right? Static evolution. Well, I don't think I've said that phrase, but I've said phrases like it about how this song doesn't do anything new but is constantly changing. And the layers is one of the ways that this happens, I think, most frequently. If you listen to what the instruments are doing, they are constantly changing, but what's being presented is still large and overwhelming. It's still based off of these short loops, little 2 or 4 bar phrases from each of the instruments, sometimes the pitches changing with the chord progression, but not always. But what's even more wild to listen to is when you realize that some of these ideas aren't just in one instrument. Just like how that 3-note stinger gets up gets ended up ends up getting passed around between all the instruments. Some of these ideas are also baton passed around as well. You might hear a little ornamental lick from the trumpets, only to realize the next time that you hear the trumpets, they're doing this melody. And if you listen, maybe a saxophone is playing that original ornamental lick. Ideas just sort of float freely between all these instruments. It creates something of, like I said, an amorphous element to the song, where I think, for the most part, the stacks themselves, if you remove what instrument they're being played by, creates a very static feeling in the song. On sheets or on paper, this song is just these 8 ideas or whatever, harmonized, duplicated, whatever, over and over and over and over and over again. Sometimes we'll have some slight variation to them, but sometimes the variation comes from what instrument is playing them. And that makes the song feel different on a sonic level. Because originally you might have heard this with a bright, piercing sound, something very brassy. But the next time you hear it, it's kind of honking like a saxophone. Or the next time you hear it, it's bright and chimey. Maybe it's a glockenspiel or something. The next time you hear it, it's electronic and digital with the synthesizer. And so the sonic properties of the sounds of these licks that you might be picking up and hearing the repetition of is in constant flux. This is a song that continues to disguise its static nature through, in a sense, sort of vapid change. It isn't necessarily writing new music, it's just changing the way the music looks or feels. It's putting the music in a different suit, and so now it looks different. But it's still, at the end of the day, the same music you just got done hearing with a new coat of paint on it. And I find that to be a really interesting idea here. Primarily because it means the song isn't changing. And this is like the thing I keep coming back to. It's why I started this whole analysis segment of sort of describing my experience listening to this. The song doesn't change. It never changes. It might alter a little thing if it doesn't feel that it can disguise that element as well anymore. It'll change it a little bit, something a little bit more palatable, maybe something a little bit less noticeable. But anything that works already just gets shifted around. Makes it feel fresh, but it never changes. And I think that's cool. It's a wild exercise, especially for something this layered, but it also makes me not really know how to feel about the song, in a sense, right? From a very cynical standpoint, this is just a lot of copy and paste. You write a few lines and then, constantly copy paste these ideas between all the instruments in your workstation and call it a day. Like I said, it's a very cynical perspective to take on it, because artistically I think it works well. I'm curious how this works with the lyrics too. But there is a moment of great change in the song. After we have the 3 minutes at the beginning, we have a little bit of a harmonic shift moving into what I think I could call the B section. Again, I'm not too sure I want to call it that because it's still just a variation of things. The foundation is still identical. But the idea in the back 30-40% of the song is rising intensity. I had mentioned that on the foundational side of things, we have the same chord progression. We've really been enjoying this entire song. But when we listen to the vocal melody, it feels less defined. It feels more cyclical. It feels more infinite. The vocal melody feels like it just keeps going, like a rambling run-on sentence with no end in sight, and it never really has any good sense of pause or form or rhythm or phrasing or anything like that. It's just trying to fill up space as best as it can. I find that to be really evocative when it's paired with the rising intensity of the music around it. We have several instruments that are just increasing their pitch constantly over time. Maybe there are moments where some instruments revert back down to a lower pitch while other ones are still high, and so your ear hears this constant rising action, even if we aren't necessarily always increasing in pitch. But alongside that, we have more and more layers coming in. They are getting louder and louder. We have a big crescendo going on here. Although I think it's more of a production crescendo because I was watching the volume thing over there and it did not increase much. But this section did feel like it was getting bigger and louder. And all of this builds up until the song sort of ends. We bring back some earlier ideas. We bring back that the 3-note grouping idea. We got like 20 seconds of this and the song ends. It fades out. When we have all of this energy and tension from the layers, the weight of all of it feeling like it's trying to crumble, this infinite loop in the melody, this rising notes. It's not really that there's tension in the harmony. I wouldn't call this eerie or anything like that. We don't really have any sense of dissonance. It just feels unbalanced. It feels like a sound that is untenable. You can't continue on with this forever. It will eventually topple. And it kind of does with the fade out in a sense. The song doesn't fall apart, but it can no longer sustain this level of intensity, of volume, of layering. And so we simplify a little bit and then drastically over time reduce the volume to nothing. It's not normally how I envision a song falling apart, but I think you could easily read it that way, of reaching such a peak amount of energy that it runs out of steam and just kind of peters out towards the end. And so, my final remarks here before we move into the lyrics is that we have a song that feels like it never changes but constantly rebrands itself in a sense until this rebranding kind of takes on its own identity and the concept of change dominates the song's personality to a point that it begins to have a panic attack. That the idea of changing without change becomes the dominant characteristic of an entity. And what does that do to someone when they realize that everything they've been trying to improve in their life has left them spinning their tires all of this energy put towards nothing. And that kind of feels like it leads towards a breakdown, which is what that eerie, tense ending feels like to me. It's a rising intensity that feels claustrophobic. It feels anxiety inducing and ends up just kind of petering out. Like I mentioned, the song just ends sort of unceremoniously with a fade out. I don't know what the lyrics are, but that's my read on the music. So let's dive into some lyrics. See what's going on there with Holy Holy. Alright. Spoiler alert. I don't know that my read of the song necessarily supports the lyrics here, but I'd be interested to see what other people might hear or find in that. Maybe there's some connections I'm missing here. The song does have a verse chorus setup before the instrumental break into a bridge into the outro. So it does get a bit linear at the back end. However, I think I want to mention right here that musically, because of the ever shifting element of the entire song, honestly, but especially the beginning, I never really found a moment when I would clearly define a verse and a chorus. And so while lyrically we have a clearly defined verse and a chorus, the chorus, I mean, well, see, here's the chorus 2 even changes quite a bit of things around. The defining factor of chorus 1 and 2 is the background vocals saying holy, holy, although I don't remember that same choir popping up the second time through, so I wonder if it was a different set of backup vocals that maybe I missed somehow. But the lyrics are a bit different from chorus 1 to chorus 2, so there is a bit of linearity there as well. And again, it kind of goes on that same idea of presenting something we've seen with a bit of a spin on it. It still lines up with a lot of the things I was feeling in the music. Anyways, verse 1, verse 2, both choruses, these tell the story of somebody who is very popular with everyone. Everyone seems to know his name, but also popular with the ladies. And verse 1 talks about him sitting at a bar and a woman walking up to him and him completely describing her. Says, from the moment you walked in, I could tell you were lonely. From the way that you had your makeup on, the way that you'd done your hair, the way you sat down next to me and ordered your drink, from the moment you put your hand on my knee, I knew I would have you with ease. Definitely have a bit of a sleaze bag here. He says, do you know how this thing works? Do you go to bed with a different man every night? Don't tell me. I'm your first, aren't I? Yeah, he's a womanizer, straight up. We got a pig here. The chorus moves on to his popularity. You must have heard about me. Everybody knows my name. Everyone knows that I'm holy. All around the world, I'm holy. Verse 2 leans into this even more, but brings in more of that womanizing element. He says, you know my name. Of course you do. Everybody does. It says, even the barmaids know my name, and I've had all of them too. It says, from the shores of Havana to Moscow and Tokyo, everyone knows my name. The chorus, again, as I mentioned, changes things up a little bit. It says, how about we dance some salsa? I'll spin you round and round on the dance floor because I'm holy. How about we take this further? I'll meet you in the bathroom. This is the event as it happened. This is not a dream or anything like that. However, it is not completely true. There is a second layer to this interaction between these two people, as we see in the bridge. This is the part where it's just like a really long run-on sentence with the rising intensity, the layers coming in, the vocals, vocal melody being a bit cyclical, and it sort of just goes nowhere while having this feeling of getting somewhere. And it's about this person meeting up with this woman earlier and telling her exactly how the evening is going to go down and asking how much it would take for this event to play out. I'm not going to read all of it because it is a lot. But the beginning does say, I'll arrive at 7. I want you there no later than 10. I want you to be dressed like a sophisticated tart with too much makeup on. Will that be all right? And I want you to sit down next to me as if by chance. I want it to seem like we've never met before. How much would that cost? And he continues to just tell her everything about how to dress, how to act, where to go, how the evening's going to play out, what he's going to say, how he wants her to react. And it paints the picture of not a womanizer who is super smooth and no one can resist him, but somebody who has to pay for this kind of attention. And there's a lot of moments within this that he wants the people in the bar or wherever they're meeting up to see what is happening. He wants them to look at him with some sort of reverence. He wants to feel holy in their presence. He wants other people to wish that they were in his position. So not only is he not smooth with women, but he also doesn't feel like he's someone that other men would look up to either, sticking with the heteronormative narrative going on here. And it really paints the picture of someone who you kind of have a little bit of empathy for. I definitely feel disgusted by with the way that, he takes this entire interaction, that this is what he wants out of life. But there's also, I think, a little bit of empathy that they don't have better examples of how to be or exist or treat people. They don't have people in their life that they could learn from and improve from, not just in the way that they view people, but also socially how they act, and that they have to pay for this type of interaction. And I think Geordie did an interesting job on this, creating not necessarily a likable character, but one that at least I feel a little sorry for. I've known people like this, and sometimes you can help them, and other times you just kind of have to cut the cord and kind of end that relationship, because no matter how hard you try, they just aren't becoming a better person. And you can't let them drag you down either, but it sucks too, right? It's not like you want to end a relationship like this, a friendship, but again, you gotta look out for yourself too. And it's one of those bittersweet things of ending a relationship with somebody who's kind of like this. The end paints the sad framing of all of this. It says, "Thank you so much. We'll meet the same time next week." And the week after that, and the week after that, and the month after that, and the next, and then the song fades out. So that's where the fade out comes from, is it's speaking about the cyclicality of this event, of meeting this person, paying for this interaction, and then going through with it. I do think it's interesting. I want to point this out too, is that despite presumably hiring a sex worker for this, they don't ever actually have sex. At one point, because remember, in the chorus originally, he says, "How about we take this further? I'll meet you in the bathroom." During the reveal, when he's describing how he wants everything to go, he says, "You'll walk into the bathroom, I'll follow after, but don't worry. We don't have to do anything. We'll just loiter there for 15 minutes or so. I'll choose your new lipstick and we will both walk back out. And I want you to tell me I'm the perfect dancer and that I smell great," yada, yada, yada. It keeps going on with stuff. But it's the idea that he doesn't even necessarily want the sexual component to this. He just wants the attention. And I think that's what adds that sad layer to it. And it's what makes my empathy kick in. Because this seems like a person who just doesn't get positive feedback in social circles. Maybe they don't have a social circle at all. Maybe they only see other people at their job. I assume they have a job to afford a service like this week after week. Um, and maybe they don't have friends that they can talk to and enjoy being around. Maybe they don't have nearby family, or maybe they've had disagreements with their family, whatever. And they basically live alone. They have acquaintances, but that's it. No social life. And to me, that's sad. Like I said, I think Geordie did an interesting job creating a character that is both not great in any way. This is definitely a gross person, but also, like I mentioned, one that I feel empathy towards, one that I'm sad about. This song's very human, I think, is where I'm pointing this. And you don't always get that with music. A very nuanced take on a character or a hypothetical person. And Geordie did a great job with that. Like I mentioned, the idea of remaking one's, well, actually, kind of, right? The song is about constant recreation of putting a fresh paint on something, not actually changing it. And that, I guess, that kind of can be read in this, right? Our person doesn't become more confident. They don't become more of a social butterfly throughout this. They just put on a nice uh, suit and look more presentable and then pay for attention. But they don't actually change their social habits. They don't change their perspective on people. They don't actually become better. They never take the path to naturally become somebody who could be this person they envision themselves to be. They just want to get to that point as quickly as they can. Shortcuts taken. So the idea of reinventing oneself without changing oneself kind of loosely fits into this narrative. I don't think it's as strong of a connection as some of the other analyses I've done. But I can kind of see a bit of it in here with the right perspective. Anyways, we've been talking about this song for quite a bit. Those are my thoughts. Geordie Greep's Holy Holy. Let me know what you thought of this song. If there's anything that stood out to you, anything that you'd like to add on to what I said or correct me on. Maybe you have your own perspective or interpretation of this track, musically or lyrically. Put all that stuff down in the comments section. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. It takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. All right, that wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow, though, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC, as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.